This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 116. Jess, Peck. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 116 of Experts on the Wire. Today my guest is Jess Peck. She is a digital analytics and senior consultant at CVS Health. Although we did record this interview while she was still at Proficient Digital, so everything she shares is from that perspective of working with that agency. On today's episode, Jess is going to share all sorts of amazing stuff about image search. You'll definitely want to listen to this if you want to know how to make your SEO better in general, but I also feel like image search is one of those areas of opportunity that is still very overlooked. So maybe you're also looking for a fresh strategy and avenue to get search traffic from in general. If so, this episode is definitely for you. For context, it was recorded pre-COVID on March 9th, 2020, but it's all very evergreen, so I think you'll find it very useful and actionable and get a lot of great ideas and insights from Jess. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 116 of Experts on the Wire. Let's go ahead and just jump right in. Jess, how are you today?
I'm doing really good, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to start by asking a little bit about your background. So I kind of do this with all the guests because SEO is this very interesting field where we all kind of like end up doing SEO, but we didn't necessarily plan on doing SEO. I saw that your background is in international affairs and relations. And I'm curious, did you ever think you would end up doing SEO, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I definitely didn't go to college thinking I would end up in any sort of marketing or like tech-related field. I went in for international politics, specifically like human rights, that kind of thing. But I did a lot of I did some web design in college, and I did some kind of database-y kind of data crunching stuff, and I did a lot of statistics, which I think kind of helped prime me for it. Mm-hmm. My dad actually said the one discipline I couldn't go into was marketing, and so I like to think that I did this to disappoint him.
Why would he say that?
He's a big hippie. He doesn't believe in marketing. I believe in like telling people why they should do things or
good marketing can be helpful when it's done right. It does not have to be annoying.
Definitely, exactly.
And so what was your first sort of memory or experience actually doing SEO? Was it a particular job or like something within a job that you had at the time, or?
I worked as kind of a admin assistant that kind of got put in charge of all of the tech stuff for this little health, like nursing agency, basically. And, you know, it was very much Jess is young and can do tech stuff, so she can be in charge of the website and the marketing and all this kind of thing. And I spent a lot of spare time looking at different ways to effectively market to a lot of people without needing a huge budget, which I feel like is a lot of the ways people end up moving into SEO.
SEO is like when you look at PPC budgets for big brands or something versus SEO, it's always this gigantic PPC budget. Some clients will tell me what they spend on PPC, and it's just this enormous amount. And then SEO is always like, oh, it's free traffic, so we don't need...
Yeah.
Right.
And especially for like, the office was 5 people operation, so it was very small.
Yeah.
So I maintained one of their sites, and then they opened up another department, and I built that site, and I got really into SEO, and then kind of one thing led to another. I got approached on LinkedIn by a recruiter who asked if I wanted to work for Stone Temple, and I was like, well, I've read several of their blog posts.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
So just to step back a second, did you say you built the website which you were marketing on before?
Yes.
What did you build the website on? WordPress or?
It was a WordPress site. I actually ended up moving it over to Wix, or like one of the like site building things.
Squarespace or something. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was just easier for everyone at the company to use.
Right. So I was going to ask how you ended up getting your role where you're at now. It's called Proficient Digital, correct?
Yeah.
But many listeners might know it as Stone Temple Consulting.
Yep.
So you were approached by a recruiter, and I guess you said you'd read many of the blog posts, so obviously that might have been enticing enough. But what did they ask? Were they just hiring for an SEO position, or how did they approach you? And then how did you end up actually deciding to take that position?
It was a basic kind of marketing associate, like entry level position, but I was interested in marketing and kind of didn't want to continue like working on my own as part of an admin role doing marketing and web stuff.
Right.
You know, I still spent a lot of time answering phone calls and doing paperwork and scanning things, which isn't necessarily the most interesting.
No, not at all.
So they said, you know, here's a basic marketing role. I kind of jumped on it. And then my current direct boss, Mats Tolander, was looking for a role doing this marketing technology position, working with our internal tools team. And he thought, because of my experience doing some website stuff and doing some code and HTML, I would be a good fit for that. So that's
right. So describe your role now, because when we chatted earlier, I think you described it as you do some client work, but you also work on internal tools there. So I'd love to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a kind of weird role in the company. We have a internal tools team. So we have a couple of developers who are great. I work with them all the time. And they build our internal tools and do big data crunching and basically any sort of big reporting or development that we need. And so I interface with them. I help our internal team understand and work on our internal tools and our vendor tools. And then I figure out what would be best to use for certain clients. And then in general, I do some tech client work.
I see. So you're kind of between the clients and the internal team. But it must be good for them to have somebody that sort of is in tune with both sides of that, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's helpful for them to have someone who is more technically SEO inclined. Neither of the guys were really into SEO. They're both developers first.
I see.
One of them was a physician going into physics. I was going to say physician. That's not right. He was going into physics before he became a developer.
Oh wow!
But both of their backgrounds are very much more on the like databases and big data and like some website building. And so we'll have internal trainings. We do a lot of Proficient's very internal training heavy, at least. So for the
tools, what kinds of tools are they? I know some other bigger companies will have their own crawler, things like that. But I'd love to hear specifically what some of the types of tools are.
Yeah, of course. We do have our own crawler. It's kind of a crowning jewel. We are really proud of it, just because it's very scalable. We've crawled hundreds upon hundreds of millions of pages and been able to crunch that data in a way that was usable. At some point, we're thinking about doing a 1 billion page crawl, but we'll see if clients need that.
Yeah.
It's based on client need. And then again, because we have our own developers, the Stan who kind of owns the crawler can add extra stuff. So some of the stuff we do, we can pull certain paragraphs For an e-commerce client, we
like custom extraction kinds of things.
yeah, exactly.
And where do you store all this data? The prior episode 115, we talked all about Power BI. What types of databases, or how are you managing all this data?
I really have to look into Power BI because it seems really interesting. But we use primarily AWS.
Okay.
At least for our SEO tools. Proficient at large has a lot of different software and a lot of different database building folks going on, but for our SEO shop, we use AWS.
Very cool. And so I do want to move in a moment to chat about image search, visual search, all the kinds of things I'm sure a lot of listeners might be working on optimizing and would be curious to hear what you've been up to with that. But first, I wanted to know if you work at all with Eric Enge directly. Just a fun little fact for some listeners. He was the very first person I ever saw speak in the SEO world. In fact, in Framingham, I believe where the office is now, he spoke at some hotel, and this was like in 2011. I remember some folks that are not in the SEO space anymore, like Jill Whalen. If anybody has never heard of Jill Whalen, you should look her up because she was very forward thinking for the time and how she really approached SEO from a non-black hat, quality content standpoint. But that was just a very memorable moment. That was the first time I met Eric and was able to chat with him a little bit afterwards. Do you get to work at all with Eric on any projects?
Yeah, I would say I spoke with Eric this morning. Not to name drop, I feel, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric works very closely with our team, and he's very involved with and very enthusiastic about SEO, of course. So a lot of our kind of features, we have a lot of internal tools, and a lot of them come from requests from Eric.
Yeah.
Like the guys one of the goals for this year is to work on some structured data validation stuff.
And cool. Like that. And doing that a little bit maybe more at scale rather than like, hey, let's take one URL and put it in the structured data tool. And even the reports in Search Console are okay, but I do feel like there would be room for something of more value that would have bigger scale to it.
Yeah, and it's useful for if we are working with a client who has their content behind password protection because it's a staging site or something like that.
Oh, wow.
We can actually crawl that, which is part of the reason we have our crawler.
Yeah.
And because we can crawl that, we can test for all this stuff before it goes live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Deep Crawl is a tool I've been using more and more lately. And I believe, I'll put a link in the show notes, but I believe they're launching a new component of their tool that will compare a dev site to the new site or do something where it checks for issues before things get pushed live.
Yeah.
Which is also very handy. So for anybody that doesn't work in a company like Proficient where you have your own tools and developers, that might be a really great solution for something like that. I'd love to talk a little bit about image search. And just to sort of set the context here, I'll first refer to image search just as this idea when an image is the returned output. So we're going to talk a little bit about visual search, which is a little bit different. But I'd love to kind of start and chat about image search and what are some of how do you spot, let's say you're working with a client and thinking about wanting to get them more visible in image search. How do you help them spot, or how do you determine the opportunities for image search? I sort of have my own process, but I'm curious what sort of things, you might look for if it's a certain type of site or certain types of images. How can sites start thinking about finding opportunities for image search?
I think some of the ways that you can see where opportunities might lie is by looking at the SERPs themselves. A lot of the time, Google will throw up an image carousel or some other image-heavy feature on the first page, especially for mobile searches.
Right.
And I think that kind of shows you where the heavier intent is.
Yes.
For seeing an image, and you don't want your client to be the one that doesn't have an image there, because Google obviously thinks it drives clicks and wants to be able to show stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's not just thinking about Google image search, with google.com/images, but you're also referring to when they show images in the regular universal results.
Yes. I think that can be a way you see where if Google thinks that users are going for images, then users may be going for images and searching an image search more often on those queries, right?
Yes.
Like, this is all hypothetical, very, very high level, but
Theoretical, yep.
I think you can kind of guess by user intent the kinds of things people are looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge image evangelist in general. I think it can be really useful for basically any client or any vertical, like, for things that are less image based, you still have opportunities when it comes to using charts and graphs and explainers to get the message across to your users better.
Yeah. So there's even this, what you're saying is maybe, you commonly might think of images in e-commerce or things like that, or like content types that have like content types that might rank software, right? And there's an image of each piece of software. But it sounds like you're saying, even if it's just typically a text-based piece of content, there's still maybe even this bigger opportunity to use an image because maybe less people are.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of phrasing it. Like, if you're in a space where people don't often have images, think about reasons why users on your site might want there to be images. Mm-hmm. Like, I think for trust-based stuff, or if you want to show your personnel and the people your customers would be working with, that's a really good way to show to use images, because that can increase trust for your users. Or again, I think having kind of charts and graphs and other explainers can be really useful if you have big walls of text, because there are people who are going to have trouble reading a big wall of text one way or another.
Right. What are some things you do? Let's say there is an image that you might want to get ranked in Google image search or as an image in a feature. Are there some optimizations that you will typically use to try to make those images rank better in image search?
Yeah, I think that there are always the obvious ones, which are make sure it's a unique image, give it a good alt text. I like to run down pages with a screen reader just to hear how the page sounds.
Oh, okay.
Making sure the alt text is...
That's a great tip. So actually two things, that tip, and then, but the prior one, make unique, I don't want to gloss over that. Do you mean unique against what's on the entire web, or unique to the website?
I mean, I think it's more important for it to be unique against the entire web.
Yeah.
I think stock photos are good because you are getting some images and some more contrast to your site, but original images are better because then Google has a reason to rank your site above other people's.
Yeah. And that's something I've said for years before. Recently, within the last year, I believe John Mueller or somebody said that non-unique images are a sign of low quality. And like years ago, I was saying to reverse image search the images you want to use. And if you're seeing a lot of other ones, it's not a unique, high value image. So that kind of sounds like what you're getting at as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's also a great tip, is like reverse image search, see if you're the 97th blog to use the same image.
Yeah. Or even the 7th wouldn't be good.
Yeah. And I think there's also a kind of, again, an element of just trust building when you have your own images. Like,
yes.
You are helping people see your brand better.
Yes. What Any particular screen reader you like to use to test things like alt text and just the accessibility of sites?
I use NVDA because it's free.
Mhm.
And
I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that a platform-specific screen reader, or?
I think it's just for PCs, but Mac users can use VoiceOver. I think you can use up VoiceOver right now if you have a Mac.
Yeah. And so you're saying you will actually load up the site on a screen reader and see what the alt text sounds like to help determine, like, actually the way somebody using a screen reader or depending upon alt text would use that.
Yeah. I think it's important to use screen readers for a couple different reasons. Like, there are a lot of users on the web who use screen readers. I'm friends with several of them, and they get quite heated about how difficult it is to navigate certain sites. So I think it's important from that standpoint, but I also think search is itself. Well, screen readers are basically another version of the DOM, right? It's the accessibility object model is kind of the phrase that's around, right? You have a machine, how a machine is interpreting the code for the user. I think search is kind of another way. Search interprets the code of a site for the user. And so I think you can kind of draw parallels and understanding between how a screen reader might read through a site or other accessibility devices, what they pick up on and what they understand, and what something like Google or Bing does with that site.
Do you also find that it helps give you an empathy for the actual people trying to look at a website on these devices?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's good for building empathy towards people who use screen readers, but also, I mean, everyone likes a clear site, right? Everyone likes good content presented clearly without too much going on.
Right.
And I think it can be a way of focusing your attention on what are the parts of the site that actually matter, and what is kind of a good bonus, and what is just kind of piling on.
Like excess stuff. It's almost like something I do sometimes when I really want to reduce or eliminate design bias. When I'm just using Chrome or something, I'll use the web developer plugin and shut CSS off. And I find that's a great just psychological trick for me to evaluate content without design bias. So if I really want to just focus on what are the words on the page, it sounds like a screen reader gets to that same idea.
Yeah, because I think the screen reader and removing CSS and removing JS, you're kind of cutting down to the content that is actually, to some extent, going to be shown to everyone.
Yes.
No matter what their device or no matter what their point of view. Like, the HTML is going to be interpreted to people in certain ways. And it can be a really useful point of view.
I like that a lot. We'll move on to visual search in a second. I was curious if you have ways of measuring any success with image search. I know somebody that's been a little loud off and on lately about the lack of data that Google gives us is AJ Cohn from blind5yearold.com. And I really like his writing. You should check out his blog. You, the listener, I know, Jess, you probably check out his blog, but the listeners out there should check out his blog. Do you have ways of measuring image search, whether it's traffic generated from that? I'd be curious to see what you do at Proficient, or maybe what you're aware of that others do, because I know it can be a struggle to measure that.
Yeah, and I think we have different methods depending on the account. We do a lot of different analytics stuff. There's an analytics group here, and we do a lot of stuff with Adobe and other platforms as well as Google Analytics. And a lot of the time it's a kind of case of doing stuff like A/B testing, looking at what changes get made and what effect the traffic has on those, what effect those changes have on traffic.
So what are some of the types of changes? Are changes to like the images, or what are some things you might A/B test?
Well, we do a lot of content-based stuff. We have a really great content team, and they'll do stuff like add better content to certain pages or make it more relevant to what users will actually be looking for.
Yeah, that's cool. And that goes even a little bit beyond just images, but just A/B testing content. That's interesting. Do you, I haven't really, I'm going to just be, I'll be honest, I haven't dug into a whole lot of the concept of tracking image search traffic. Is there a way that you're aware of that you can attribute traffic to Google image search versus somebody just clicking on a blue link in Google?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a great way to do that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of.
AJ's article talks about.
Oh, right. He wrote a whole article on this, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll put that in the show notes too.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a sore spot for a lot of us doing SEO. And then if you are investing in image search, because it would be great to have a way to, say, hey, we got you more visibility with images, but then you have to say, sorry, we can't measure it or even attribute revenue to that visibility.
Yeah.
Are you pulling up AJ's post?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember exactly the name. It keeps coming up with the post he wrote in 2013, which was about image search. A little
bit of irony here that we can't Google and find the correct post from AJ. Well, we can dig that up and put it in the show notes for listeners. But why don't we chat a little bit about visual search, which I'm very fascinated by as well. So can you set up the idea and the concept of visual search? And, this is now different than image search, right? So what is the idea of visual search?
So I think I would define visual search as using techniques like image recognition and machine learning to use images to search for, well, you could say search for entities as a shorthand, but it's using real world images and photos as a starting point for searching rather than keywords.
Right. So the image is now the input for the search. I want to chat in a second about the study that you did with Proficient, because I think it's really cool. And there's some very interesting takeaways in there. But do you see a way coming down the road, or even now, that this might be relevant at some point to SEOs or somebody like a website owner? Is it going to be maybe more the case in the future that this visual search will be another common way that we'll have to optimize for and people will be searching?
Yeah, I think those are all elements that definitely come into it. I mean, the very cyberpunk thing is, right, everyone starts putting really heavy brands on clothes and things, so you can't search. You can take a photo and it comes up with the brand. Like that's or ensuring that you have unique styles in your images and things like that. Like, how can the images and the way you brand yourself be led back to you using only those images?
Interesting. Is part of this something like, there's this idea that I think I've heard of where, like, if you're watching a TV show and you see somebody wearing an item of clothing, like, you could just search off of that visual. Is that sort of part of this?
I mean, yeah, my big example of reasons to use image search is I have I found a pair of really ridiculous, bright-looking shoes at a thrift store, and they weren't my size, and I really wanted them. So I could reverse image search those shoes, come up with, the seller originally, or like another is my brother is autistic and terrible at spelling. He's good at a lot of things, and I love him very much, but he is terrible at spelling, and it is easier for him to use voice and visual search, like to take a photo of a thing or even take a photo of text someone else has written and search for that than it is for him to sit down and try and spell a query.
Oh, that's cool. So there are some practical applications of this. And I like the other one you mentioned, where maybe if you're a brand that you keep something about your visuals consistent, or you have some kind of branding, almost like the idea of a watermark or something, where if somebody finds that image in the wild and searches it, it'll lead back to your site. Like, are there some concrete ways that people can do that? Is that just a matter of like color schemes, or what are some ways you can actually make your image findable like that?
Well, I think it's going to depend on depends on what you're selling.
Yeah.
So for some brands, it's going to be having a distinct logo or distinct branding of the item. For others, it's going to just have the items themselves be in your brand style.
And what's like a brand style? Are we talking like colors, or, forgive my ignorance on what this style is.
We're fully getting kind of into the conceptual at the moment.
Yeah. That conceptual is good though.
Yeah. I think stuff like, you can kind of recognize IKEA furniture without necessarily knowing that it's from IKEA.
Right.
And they've really invested in a lot of visual search stuff. They're very heavy on Pinterest, which has a really strong visual search component.
Interesting.
And I think that it's a really good and interesting way for them to go. And I think they're leading in a lot of kind of visual search stuff.
I think this just speaks to like how important it is for SEO to really be a layer on top of everything. That's how I think of it. I don't think of SEO as a channel. I think of you need to layer SEO on top of development, on top of product, on top of image, on top of branding. And I mean, you're nodding your head, so that you must see the same thing, especially when you do get the chance to work with bigger companies. You probably see how when they don't layer SEO into something, that's where they miss opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think pretty consistent. I think having good working relationships with developers is really important, and also kind of the breadth of how SEO can be used and the breadth of how search is getting used, the way it's kind of everywhere now. And so there are lots of ways that SEOs can advise brands and work on sites to get eyes from more and more places, from more and more actions.
So in this study, what was yourself and Proficient, what were you looking to learn from doing this study about visual search?
We were looking to learn a couple different things. There was a claim at Google I/O a couple of years ago that the Google's visual recognition was as good as people's visual. Yep. I think I should have had the quote written down.
That's okay. Well, if it's in the study, or if not, we can dig up the quote and we'll put it in the show notes. But I get the gist of it. Google making large claims yet again, just like how they claimed or somebody claimed that voice search was like 50% of searches or some weird number like that. I know that's not perfect, but it was yet another outlandish claim from Google.
I don't want to say outlandish.
I'll say it. I'll take credit.
Okay. But we were interested to test that hypothesis, and we were interested to see how computers recognize images and how that might be applied in search. Especially because of news like I think in 2018, Chrome started sending text that was based on visual recognition software to screen readers. So if there was empty alt text, it would kind of provide its own alt text based on visual recognition.
So I see. So mainly the study is you're trying to figure out how good are not only Google, but AWS, IBM, Microsoft, how good are they at recognizing images? And you also tested this against human tagged images as well.
Yes.
And you have a chart of the overall score. Let's give away the punchline to the listeners. What scored best for the overall image recognition?
Well, it turns out people scored the best there. Still, we were not super surprised by that because part of the study was just trying to figure out how we could measure what seeing well meant and describing images well meant.
Right.
It's kind of got to a philosophical kind of point of what does it mean to see and describe an image well.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I could see a dog and that we'll all agree on that, but maybe there's other types of things that would be described a little bit differently.
Yeah, and what do you see as more important in the dog?
Right, the color or the breed or
Yeah.
And so what percentage, where did Google fall? So the human tagged was 87.7% accurate.
Yep.
And where did Google fall?
Google got, I think, 81%, 81.7% accurate.
Not as good as humans. And who was the worst at the image recognition?
I feel the need to defend IBM Watson. They I think they were a lot more. I think it's kind of leads to one of the things that was interesting about this is you could really see where each API and each recognition engine was trained and focused, because IBM Watson was a lot more literary and took a lot more, I think taking a lot more risks for a machine is a kind of weird way of saying it, but it did a lot more like trying to figure out the relationships between people in the image.
I see.
And trying to kind of guesses based on context. It felt a lot more machine learning-y, I guess. Whereas you could really tell that the Google Vision was designed for search and extracting. Like, if someone is looking for something, this is what they're going to be searching for. Whereas AWS was really good at recognizing and describing products.
Big surprise there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good job, Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
So you also tested, this is how well engine-generated tags match user descriptions.
Yes.
How is that different than just the first overall score? So what is that actually testing for?
So we wanted to compare it by we used manual review for this because that was really the only way we could see the differences.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out to our tireless testers who spent a lot of time looking at these images. But we wanted to see how much each tag was accurate and then compared to what a human might actually say, because the machines would pick out things that humans might not care about or say. So there's a difference between being accurate and being relevant. And so that's the kind of thing we were trying to pick up on there.
I see. And so I'm looking at a chart that says human hand tagged 573, and it's a super tall chart. And then the next one is Google at 217, which is like less than half. So what are those numbers representing there? Is just, what's that 573 and then the 217 for Google Vision?
So we basically created the human hand tagged is I joked about them being our neural network API, but it was just a couple of some proficient people who performed the same actions as the APIs. They went through by hand and wrote tags basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we gave them a limit, and we said, just write the 5 or so tags that you think are relevant to this image.
I see.
And then we got a completely different group to come in and look at the tags from all of the different ones and see which ones matched how they would describe them.
I see. It's a great study. I do want to move on and talk more about maybe a little bit of voice search and digital personal assistants, which I know you did a study on as well. But I'll put the link to the study from Proficient Digital in the show notes, and everyone can check out all the cool charts. And there's some really fascinating stuff about the most common words that were used and things like that. So it's very, very interesting study. But yeah, let's chat a little bit about digital personal assistants. How would you define these in the parameters, right? Because when I think of those, I first think of like an Echo or a Google Home, but also there's an assistant component just right within Google Search, in a way. So how in context with this study, how are we kind of defining a personal assistant?
We kind of try to keep it to a kind of base group of 7 or so. So Alexa and the Echo, Cortana, Siri, and then various Google Assistant devices. We mostly kept it 2 devices, although we do have Google Assistant on smartphones as one of our groups. And then, I believe that Google Assistant is now the voice assistant in Google Search generally, right? I
think so. And I think I just saw a tweet today. They just announced a new app or like some sort of new component of their assistant. Like someone was commenting, it looks like a music player almost or something. Did you see that? It just happened today.
You can now use Google Assistant to read out web pages.
Okay. Thank you.
It's basically, instead of having a screen reader, you can tell Google Assistant to read it out and it will do the same thing.
So that goes back to the importance of the screen reader stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
So what were you trying to learn with this study?
For this study, it's again kind of pitting different digital personal assistants against each other, but also seeing how smart they are. I put little quotation marks around that.
Yep.
Seeing how well they respond to different commands, how well they understand what people are saying.
And how many queries did you use for this entire test? It's there, but I'm queuing you up for the answer.
4,999 queries.
So did you have actual people sit down and query these things 5,000 times?
Yes.
And why 4,999? Why not go up to 5,000? That's a funny number.
That's a question you'll have to ask Eric. Okay. Someone can ask him on Twitter. But I was one of the people doing this querying.
Oh my goodness!
It's a vast undertaking. A lot of the worst conference rooms in our building get taken up by people sitting and talking to digital personal assistants for
for days.
Periods of time. Yep.
Wow. So you were trying to basically determine what digital personal assistants were the best or answered things most accurately, or what are some of the things that you were looking for?
I think saying the best, most accurate, full and correct answers. So not just giving an answer, but giving an answer that was correct, that made sense, that completely satisfied the user's intent, rather than just kind of a partial or incomplete answer.
What sort of surprised me here a little, maybe not, but Google Assistant and Google Home got the best results in one of these charts. And then Alexa and Echo Show came in second, it looks like. And then there's Siri and Cortana. So I think that Alexa surprises me a little there. Like, it seems like they're doing better than Apple with this.
Yes. We have a couple different hypotheses about that. So we found for Alexa and Siri especially, they were worse when the questions were worse. So some of our question set were kind of poorly structured or obscure. So like things like, what movies do the Rushmore New York appear in? They didn't really have an answer for, which is fair, I think. Editorializing this, I'm not sure if this is a proficient point of view, but I feel like part of the issue for Siri was that I think they've gotten very hard into machine learning stuff. So I think they're a little bit kind of guessing. It's, I think, a more experimental stage.
So maybe they're trying to push the envelope a little, but because of that, it looks like they're doing worse. But maybe they're just trying uncharted things potentially.
Yes.
Interesting. What are some other takeaways from this? I'm kind of going through the different charts, and again, we'll put the link in the show notes. There's a lot of very interesting things. You also have the number of incorrect responses, and Siri is like off the chart.
Yeah.
On that.
It's just got a smaller knowledge graph than Google and Alexa, I think.
Right.
And
so was anything from this study, were there takeaways that you were then able to draw and then think about how to practically apply this sort of digital assistant, knowledge or ecosystem to maybe some of the SEO work or client work? Are there things that, I know when we chatted before, you talked about maybe trying to build some Alexa skills or things that actual brands can leverage in this assistant space. So what are some of those opportunities? Well,
I think, so we build Google Assistant and Alexa skills at Proficient. It's a fun, exciting new field and an interesting way to leverage some of the SEO work we do. And I think for a lot of these questions, the answers could be fielded and maybe fielded better by a brand or a built assistant app.
Right.
So
rather than just a search engine.
Yes.
Interesting.
And the search engine can surface these apps. And so, there are certain news items and radio items that will always come up on Alexa as an app because the app is there. But like, I think at the time, IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, neither of them had any sort of skill or Google Assistant app. And so that was a huge opportunity for
a movie company. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's almost like if you're a brand known for a certain topic or field and there's no personal assistant answering those things, that's a big opportunity, it seems like.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still kind of an untested space. There's obviously a lot of voice stuff people get very excited about voice stuff because it feels very futuristic.
Right.
So obviously you need to look at what the actual goal and what the actual takeaways are, what you might gain from it. But I also think if you have resources and you want to get ahead of this kind of new conversion path, new way to reach clients, I think it could be really valuable to do that.
Yeah.
I also think if you are in healthcare, any sort of healthcare or medical space, it would be useful to do this because I know one of the largest places that digital personal assistants tend to be used is for people who have motor disabilities, or who are also the elderly. A lot of elder care homes will have these kinds of personal assistants.
Interesting. Yeah, when you really start thinking about it, there's a lot of little opportunities, or not even little, but just there's a lot of spaces with this sort of opportunity and needs that it can fill.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people who people search in all sorts of different ways. And if you know that your users are kind of people who are searching a different way, fielding that is important. Yeah,
absolutely. So I also want to point out that there's a chart for the number of joke answers, and Siri won that one. So apparently Apple has, not yet the best answers, but the best sense of humor. So
they've had longer to train Siri to respond with jokes, I think.
Yeah, I think that's funny. So I'm almost thinking of this sort of opportunity about building a skill or an app or something, almost like a content type. I always think of it as like, because it's this sort of, you describe very nicely a two-step process where somebody still might go to a search engine, but they might get an assistant or a skill as the result. Then they're aware of that. And then they might, instead of going to Google the next time, maybe just go right to that skill.
Yeah. There are a couple of different radio programs that have Alexa skills. And I think if you have an Alexa enabled device in your house and you want to listen to your favorite radio show, maybe your favorite podcast, and you can do it by just saying, "Hey Alexa, play X," and you have it enabled. That's a lot easier. People like it when things are easy.
I believe Wait, Don't Tell Me, that NPR game show, has a game that's a personal assistant game that you can play, which is another clever way to use something like that.
Oh yeah, we have a couple of quizzes, SEO quizzes, that we've built that are Proficient Digital.
Oh really?
SEO quizzes. I'll see if I can find the page for it. They might have been taken down for some tweaks, but
yeah. Once you dig those up, we'll put those in the show notes as well, and then people can play around with those. And it's always good to see examples of companies trying these things. So we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes. I did want to ask you a little bit about, so your Twitter feed is really great. I think for anybody that, is looking for someone to follow, that you seem to very well curate things across that sort of go across SEO, accessibility, development. You share a lot of technical things. And I find that it's just very well curated. So I'm curious, how do you find all of these awesome things to share? Do you have like lists that you follow? I'm just very curious where you're seeing all that stuff.
I'm extremely online. That's my joke answer.
Yep.
I follow a lot of different developers. I try and keep a pretty diverse feed. Like obviously I follow a lot of SEO folks, but I try and follow a lot of developers with interesting points of view, accessibility projects and that kind of thing. I also am subscribed to like 40 mailing lists.
Okay. I thought maybe you would subscribe. Back in the day, I used to just throw all my favorite blogs in RSS reader, and that's how I'd find things to share on Twitter. So yeah, I thought maybe you were subscribed to something. Because I often see things in your feed that I don't see anyone else sharing, and maybe I need to diversify who I'm following to some degree as well. I was just curious where you found all that cool stuff.
Yeah, I would say Free Code Camp. They share a lot of really interesting stuff.
As an account to follow on Twitter, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay.
They also have a really good newsletter, and then another newsletter for folks who like getting inboxes. Front End Focus, I really like.
Okay.
And CSS tricks.
Oh, great. Awesome. Those are great suggestions.
Yeah.
So as we wrap things up, and speaking of Twitter, tell everyone your Twitter or where else they can find you online, and then maybe some like Proficient and things like that. Where are all the places people can find you, follow you, etc.?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Jess the BP, And that's probably the best place to find me. I also write for the Proficient Digital blog. I do that often. So
awesome. Yeah, you just did a series recently on HTML, I believe, for marketers.
Yes.
And that's a great series too. So we'll put all the links in the show notes so people can check that out.
A lot of links in the show notes.
So, and my wife, who's probably listening to this after the fact, she's the one that gathers all those. So,
cool.
Thank you, Sarah, and good luck with that. There's a lot of links in this one. Okay, awesome. Well, Jess, thank you very much for joining us on episode 115 of Experts in the Wire. I had a lot of fun chatting with you about all those things: image search, visual search, accessibility, etc. So thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to everyone next time. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Dan.